morning, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is July 20th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control, and He does love you. And we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show. Knowing the fear of the Lord, we persuade folks of the truth. I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State, and it's going to be a hot one today in the central Susquehanna Valley. I've been all over this great country driving truck, and there's places that are way more humid than here, but those folks get used to that humidity. There's nothing like going from no humidity to 100% humidity in just a day's time like it is in the central Susquehanna Valley. But it is summertime in the northern hemisphere. It's not due to climate change or global warming or global cooling. It's just the season that it's in. Oh, folks, today we're going to talk a little bit about the Constitution. I got some news stories I want to bring up to you. But the more I discuss on social media and other places, but mainly social media, the more I discuss healthcare, voting, any road improvements, anything that you care to talk about politically, that's abortion, right to life, stuff like that. The more I talk to folks about these things, the more I'm coming to the understanding that Americans are willfully, and I do mean to use that word, they're willfully ignorant of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, who the founding fathers were, what their thoughts were, the things that they actually wrote about, what they put in the Constitution. We are willfully ignorant as Americans. And why do I say willfully? And a lot of people say, well, we're just woefully ignorant. No, we're willfully ignorant. Because, folks, not everybody in the United States, but I would say the majority of Americans either have a PC at their house, or they have a smartphone they can look these things up, or they can go to the local library and this might be an antiquated idea, they can check out books to read about the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. But the public libraries also have internet access where they can actually go and do this research online. So, to me, there's no excuse for American citizens to be this willfully ignorant of the Constitution. It just, in my mind, there isn't, unless you have. And I shouldn't have to say this, folks. I mean, this is in this PC era. You have to correct the PCers out there. I always have to put these adjectives on the end, unless you're mentally incapacitated, mentally handicapped or something like that. Folks, I shouldn't even have to say that, but there's people that will come back. Well, what about these folks here? Yeah, what about those folks? I wasn't including them. I wasn't being ignorant and leaving them out, but I wasn't including them either because I know that there's Americans out there. Anybody with a modicum level of common sense knows that there's Americans out there or people throughout the world that do not have the mental capacity to learn. But is that you? The person, I've said this before to these folks, and I don't know if I scared them off or maybe I was just too abrupt with them or they thought maybe I was being mean. But I'm saying, I'm not talking about you. Obviously, you have the mental capacity to get on here and do this. So why bring them up? And this is a tactic of the anti-freedom folks. They always deflect or defer or whataboutisms. And that actual phrase, I talked about that at the beginning of the week or the end of last week about whataboutisms. And now I'm seeing folks like Andrew Klavan over at Daily Wire starting to use that in his. Not that I started it, folks. Honestly, I didn't start it. But now I'm seeing more and more people use that in their broadcasts on YouTube or in their podcasts, talking about whataboutism. And our parents, if you think about it, our parents didn't let us get away with that whataboutism. And nor should we let other Americans get away with that. And we should not, honestly, allow Americans, especially folks who have a level of intelligence to be able to get on it and actually post things to social media, we shouldn't let them be allowed, or we shouldn't let them get away with the distortion of the Constitution and try to twist it to fit their agenda. And the problem, the biggest problem I see, because I've been asking these questions, especially last night, this guy on Indivisible Group called me a troll. You know, internet troll. Oh, he's just over here trolling, trying to stir up trouble. I'm like, no. And this guy, he's a college graduate and everything. He's an older gentleman, about my age, maybe a little bit older from the just looking at the picture. And I'm thinking, I'm asking questions. I'm not calling people names. I'm not being ignorant, profane, or anything like that. I'm asking legitimate questions for these folks, especially over at Indivisible Group, who really is hammering on this healthcare issue. Please show me in the Constitution where it says that the federal government has the authority to govern over America's health. And they can't do it. Everything that they've given to me, I've shot down with explanation. I just didn't go out and say, well, you dumb idiot, you know, you don't know nothing. And I didn't do that. I used it as a teaching moment. I used it saying, look, this is how this reads. And if you, and look, if you went back to my high school and talked to Mrs. March, she's probably laughing about this now. I don't know if she's still alive or she's in her grave, but she's probably, wherever she's at, she's probably laughing about this because I didn't see the benefit of grammar and everything in high school. Now I really do see the benefit of grammar, and I try to do the best I can. You know, this redneck is just doing the best that he can to get through this grammatical stuff, but I do understand it. I have been teaching myself over the years, and if you look at those sentences, there's a word in there, thereof, and you have to look and see what was preceding that. Therefore, when you see the word therefore, Rusty Starks, he was a preacher here at Susquehanna Valley Church of Christ years ago. One of his rules of interpretation, if you see the word therefore, look and see what it's there for. That means look and see what they're going to be talking about real quick here. But if you see the term thereof, you got to look what's preceding that and see what they're talking about. So I was trying to educate these people, and I'm almost coming to the conclusion there is no educating some folks in America. They have a narrative. They've been indoctrinated so well by our education system. I'm talking about not only K through 12, but also in higher learning. They've been so indoctrinated to understand only one thing, the narrative. And if there's anything that doesn't support the narrative, it has to be wrong. And folks, I'm telling you right now that America was set up. I mean, a lady asked Ben Franklin, what did you give us? And he told her a republic if you can keep it. They specifically set up a representative republic that is controlled by the Constitution. In other words, we have liberty by law here in the United States. Our liberty is protected in law. And this is what they gave us. And there's way too many Americans out there that are willfully ignorant of this. And it's not that I tire of teaching. I don't. I enjoy that. I enjoy teaching these folks. But the problem with teaching, and I know, you know, I know frustrated teachers out there. I have a lot of friends that are teachers. We have several that go to our congregation, and they get frustrated with teaching when we're talking about they put out these truths and these facts, and the kids just don't soak them up. You know, and it seems like they're banging their head against the wall, but they don't stop. And I'm not going to stop either. I'm going to continue to teach these people about the Declaration of Independence and about the Constitution with all the other documents that flow around that. And what I'm talking about, you got the Declaration of Independence, you have the Federalist Papers, you have the Anti-Federalist Papers, you have diaries from Jefferson and Madison and George Mason and John Adams and the letters between Adams and Jefferson talking about these important subjects. You have access on the internet to the 1828 Webster Dictionary that defined the terms of the day, that defined the terms that they used in the Constitution. So you can understand that. And the biggest obstacle I see in America, with America thinking about the Constitution, trying to understand the Constitution, they've been brainwashed into thinking that only constitutional scholars can know what the Constitution says. Therefore, you have to defer to a constitutional scholar. And I say, that's bogus. I call bunk on that. And why do I say that? If you go back to the Federalist Papers, what were the Federalist Papers? They were a bunch of essays that were put together that were sent out by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and a couple other folks, and I can't remember them right off the top of my head, sent them out to the several newspapers throughout the colonies, or actually the states at that time, because they were no longer a colony. We've already won our independence, to explain what they were doing. And these were published in newspapers. And newspapers, even back then, were widely read. Now, they didn't have door-to-door service like we have today, where everybody that wants one can get a newspaper delivered to their house. They didn't have that. But folks, if you go back and do some study in history back there, a lot of times when you went to a tavern, newspapers were being read at the tavern, especially about the important political things that were going on. They were read all over the place. Coffee houses and restaurants that were back then. You could, matter of fact, newspapers used to be posted up on walls in the cities, so you could actually stand there and read them. A lot of people did. And so the founding fathers, or the framers, I should say, wrote these essays so everybody could understand them. What do you mean, Dan? You mean the people could actually read these essays and go back and read the Constitution and know exactly what it says? Yep, they did. They did. And you know what? They were no better educated, maybe a little bit better educated than we are today, because they weren't indoctrinated back then. They were educated. Today we have way too many people, even coming out of college, that have been indoctrinated into this ideology, and they won't budge off it. They stop their education. That's the worst thing that I see with especially some of these college-educated folks in the liberal arts. They get done with their college, and that seems like the end of they got all the information they need. There's no more to be had. And if a foreign idea comes in that doesn't mesh with their ideology or their narrative or their talking points or whatever, they dismiss it out of hand. And they train themselves to look at key words. Like I shared with this one guy a very good article about the Supremacy Clause, and also the General Welfare Clause last night, and because it came from the Heritage Foundation, that dreaded ultra right-wing foundation, that it can't be trusted. And I know, because of the speed of the response, that he could not have read what was being said there. And if he did, he may not have, but he might have come back with a different understanding of that. Dave's asking a question: do you know of a modern English version of the Federalist Papers, Declaration of Independence, and Constitution that's available online and accurate? I do know. I'll have to look this up and research, but if the Blaze, Glenn Beck, that wingnut, at least to me, he seems like he's gone off the deep end. But anyway, his foundation, or his radio show, or whatever his media group is, Mercury Radio, I think it is. They were supposed to translate what you're talking about, at least the Federalist Papers, the Declaration of Independence. I don't think they did the Declaration of Independence, but I think they did the Constitution, and it was supposed to be like an all-in-one teaching guide with they would go through the Declaration of Independence, or let's say the Constitution. That's a better example. I think it was the Constitution and Federalist Papers. They actually went through and brought it up into modern English in the Constitution, and then the corresponding passages or essays in the Federalist Papers, they actually put that in there and upgraded those into more modern English. Let me make a note. I'll have to look that up. But I know modern English Constitution. I'll look that up, and I'll try to have that for everybody on Free For All Friday tomorrow. But yeah, there was an effort to do that, Dave, and I haven't seen it. I don't think it was very well publicized if it did get out. If it didn't, that could be, like I said, I'm not a grammarian, but that could be something that I could start undertaking myself, to try to put something together like that, or with help. I know I couldn't do it all myself. Maybe help from my friends and stuff like that. Maybe be a concerted group effort, as it were, to get these things done. All right. Today's show is being brought to you by my affiliate marketer partner, Bluehost.com. They have a back-to-school savings going on right now over at Bluehost, and starting off at $2.95 a month. And this is who I use. I use Bluehost for the DanClementsShow.com show notes page, and that's where I also have an archive in each episode of my podcast. And I also, it also directs you back over to my YouTube channel to see my lovely face. But it's a hosting service. It's WordPress ready, and WordPress is very easy to use to get your website up and running, to make a very beautiful website. It gives you a little bit more control over your website than other web hosting services at a very reasonable cost. You have a free site builder on there. Like I said, it has a one-click WordPress install. Any of the WordPress plugins I've ever put on there, I just hit a button to install it. It installs it, checks everything out, and knock on wood, I haven't had to take one out yet because it messed up the whole site, and stopped the whole site. And they also have 24/7 support. So if you go over to DanClementsShow.com, and up at the upper header, you'll see the Bluehost widget up there. Click on that and go over there and get your account set up for whatever you're going to do. If you're doing a podcast, perfect place to put your show notes page and your audio episodes like I do, or blog. If you're an e-marketer, great. They have some really good tools over for e-commerce if you're going to do stuff like that. So if you're into that, if you want to get started in that, maybe try to make a little bit money online, or just share your thoughts, needs, and desires with folks, check out Bluehost over at the DanClementsShow.com. All right, today's daily Bible verse comes from the book of James, chapter 4, verses 6 through 10. But he gives more grace. Therefore, he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Wait a minute, excuse me. I'm in the wrong, sorry. I was doing some work this morning, and I was in the wrong show notes page. This is episode 846, by the way. I'm still in the book of James. Don't get out of the book of James. You got in there. It's James chapter 5, verses 17 through 18. Kind of thought something was weird there because that was yesterday's Bible verse. James chapter 5, verses 17 through 18. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain. And it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. Now, I don't want folks to come away with the misunderstanding about this. It wasn't Elijah himself that actually did this, and it wasn't actually that he prayed that actually did this. It was the power of God that Elijah was such a man that he prayed to God, and when God looked down upon him with favor, he granted what Elijah was asking for. And you got to go back and read the story of Elijah. I encourage you to go do that. And but this is, Elijah wasn't using God like a cosmic ATM to get all of his goodies. There's a specific reason why Elijah prayed for this, and was to show the people in the land that who was God, and that's exactly what he was doing. Today's quote meal comes from Robert Murray M'Cheyne. You will never find Jesus so precious as when the world is in one vast howling wilderness. Then he is like a rose blooming in the midst of the desolation, a rock rising above the storm. Most times in my life, when I feel the nearest to Jesus is when I'm going through something very, either physically or spiritually troubling to me. And that's when I feel the closest. And I'm not saying I don't feel close to God and Jesus the rest of the times, but that's when God and Jesus really shine in times of turmoil in my life. Today, the short Bible lesson today is rules of interpretation. Let me get into this. Rules of Interpretation by Mike Riley over at gewatkins.net. Now, this is the second installation of this. This is rule number 8. We went through 1 through 7 yesterday. Rule number 8, a passage must be interpreted in harmony with any idioms it contains. I'm not going to try to explain that. It's like I said, go in and look at that. And that's key, because too many people take passages out of context. We talked about context yesterday. 9, all passages on any given subject must be studied. This is where denominations fall down flat on their face. They take verses out of context, and they're not supported by other verses in the Bible. Now, when we study a topic of, let's say, baptism, we have to go in and look at all the verses that actually contain the word of baptism. That's where good concordance comes in. Or you do what I do. I do have concordances, but I use blueletterbible.org on the internet. It's by the Moody Foundation, not Moody Brothers, Moody Foundation. And they have a lot of tools in there. You can look these words up, dictionaries, Hebrew, Greek dictionaries. Wonderful online source for that. So all passages on any given subject must be studied. So that's in order to get a full understanding of what God is saying. God does not talk about through the Holy Spirit and give his word to his apostles and those that wrote the New Testament, put everything about baptism in one book. It is sprinkled throughout the whole New Testament. The same way with salvation, the same way with adultery, murder, any subject you want to bring up, marriage, all that kind of stuff. Observe the proper balance of scriptural truth. And we've been talking about this past few days, and you're talking about, knowing what truth is, what facts are, coming to that knowledge of the truth. 11, let plain passages determine difficult passages. And this is a good one. This is why you have to go back to point 9, and you got to look at all the passages on a given subject. And then if there's a difficult passage in there, go to the passages that you understand the best and work your way back up from there, and it'll give you an understanding of the more difficult passages. Number 12, rightly divide the book, the dispensations, the covenants, and the settings. And a lot of times we don't do that either, especially with this end times theology that's being preached today. They conflate the Old Testament books with the New Testament books. They misunderstand the visions that are in the Old Testament books and also in the book of Revelation, and they try to apply it to modern times, and they don't look at it as a historical record. And when that happens, when you take it out of the context of history, like the dispensations and the covenants, stuff like that, you come away with some very, very erroneous understandings of the Bible. And then finally, rightly divide the language. The Bible is written in Hebrew, Arabic, and Greek. And you got to rightly divide those. And sometimes there are the Latin Vulgate or the Greek Septuagint. They are translations into Latin or Greek. But if you go back to as far back to the original language as you can, you get an easier and better understanding. So there is the second installment of that, actually the third installment. The first one was hermeneutics, and then they go into the interpretations. Tomorrow will be the third and final one on that. We'll go over those items when we get there tomorrow. Now I got two videos I want to share with you, but I don't want to split them up because they're like 4 minutes apiece. But they're very, very good to sort of illustrate what I'm talking about here, especially when we're talking about different types of political systems, like a republic or democracy or socialism. Socialism is a political economic system. Capitalism is a political economic system, or free market capitalism, things like that. And I found that this one here is Charles Kirk is Turning Point USA founder. That's Turning Point USA as a blog. They're a foundation that looks back on these things and try to educate people on certain subjects. He debunks the myth of democratic socialism, and I have his video here, and then we're going to talk about a couple things here, and then I'm going to show you the Prager University video with Stephen Crowder talking about the same, because he mentions them in there. So I would be amiss if I didn't use both of those, or at least get into both of those. So let me get this set up, and let me see here. Okay. All right. Let me get into this now.
One of the biggest issues, conversations I have with people back home is Bernie Sanders is socialism. No, it's democratic socialism. It's completely different.
I love this question.
And
I could talk about socialism for hours.
I just want to know what's the best punchback line to come at that, because that's always the thing. He's a democratic socialist.
So first of all, there's a great PragerU video about this that Stephen Crowder did. Excellent. So don't fall for that. I mean, democratic socialism, the people's it's socialism, which inherently means the following. It is immoral, it is evil, it is impractical when put in practice. So you should say this, under the banner and guise of democratic socialism, which is a term that Joseph Stalin used, which is a term that Lenin used, which is a term that Hugo Chavez used, which is a term that Fidel Castro used, which is a term that Pol Pot used, which is a term that Mao used. 100 million people died in the last 100 years. 100 million people died under democratic socialism. What Bernie Sanders wants to bring to this country. He wants to bring an ideology that killed people and is killing people to this day. We have a regional director, Joanna Rodriguez. Her family's from Venezuela. She does amazing work. Families from Venezuela, they're eating dogs in the streets. The average Venezuelan has lost 36 pounds in the last year. They're dying of starvation. But you know what? Their leader, Maduro, he's gaining weight. He has champagne at nights, and he eats caviar on the balcony window, while the people thought that they voted for and supported a democratic socialist government. So what really happens in socialism is, to put simply, is the poor will never get richer, but people who have anything will get equally poor. So you're equal. They love equality. The left loves equality, right? Well, you'll all be equally poor, and the very about a couple thousand people will be so magnificently rich, and they'll have everything and control the entire country. And so, again, I would respond to that with questions and ask everything I said back in question form. But I believe the biggest failure in human history in the last 100 years has been our inability to recognize the failure of socialism. And the fact that it's here now on our shores horrifies me.
All right, so that was Charlie Kirk from the Turning Point USA Foundation. And it gives a really good explanation of what socialism is. And just because you put democratic socialism in the front of it doesn't make it any more palatable. Now, real quick, I want to get this out of the way to get into the rest of the show, but this goes to show Americans' misunderstanding of things, not interpreting things correctly, not doing their research. What Bernie Sanders says sounds good on the surface until you start digging into it. You know, who wouldn't want a free ride in life? That's what Bernie Sanders is talking about. Socialism isn't a free ride. Well, if it is a free ride, then it'd be a free ride to the poorhouse, because there's only certain people that are going to benefit from it. And those are at the very top. Bernie Sanders, he claims to be a democratic socialist, and he is in certain aspects, but he's also a capitalist on the other hands, because he owns 3 properties. Him and his wife are multimillionaires, although his wife's under investigation for fraud right now, and I haven't seen any updates on that lately. So, but here's the Steven Crowder over at PragerU. If you're not subscribed to PragerU, and he doesn't pay me to say this, Dennis Prager has this video website over on YouTube called PragerU, and they have a lot of really good videos over there, and they're like 4 to 5 minute videos each. So they're real easy to watch. They pack a lot of information into these and explains a lot of things. You can go over there. He's been doing it for years now. So it has a whole library of these videos, and I have them. I'm subscribed to them. I watch them on my big screen TV down there, because like I told you before, I wouldn't say YouTube junkie, but I like watching YouTube videos. My wife doesn't get it. Lori, my wife, at all doesn't get it. So in the evening when we're sitting down and she wants to watch something I'm not really interested in, I'll plug the old headphones in and watch YouTube videos on my laptop. So here's, let me get it set up here. Here's Steven Crowder from Louder with Crowder program talking about and debunking socialism.
Democratic socialism. It's not the same as socialism because it's democratic, right? Or something, right? People are buying that. People buy that now, right? Apparently. As though adding the word democratic in front of a word changes what it means. Just because we toss something to a vote doesn't change what that something is, nor does it alter whether that something is inherently good or bad. Couple of examples, because I know you'll ask. Hamas was democratically elected as the government in Gaza, despite the fact that the destruction of not only Israel, but the eradication of all Jews is in their official charter. Robert Mugabe, or Bobby Mugabe if you prefer, was democratically elected by a loving majority in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, how's that working out? Venezuela? Well, Hugo Chavez, noted personal favorite and friend of Sean Penn, to whom he constantly pointed as being unfairly characterized as a dictator when in fact he was democratically elected as a socialist. Well, how'd that work out for Venezuela? Well, It's now on the brink of collapse, despite it being one of the most resource-rich nations in the entire world. Basic things like eggs, milk, flour, and toilet paper are either too expensive for the average Venezuelan or simply out of stock. Out of stock, mind you, democratically. I know. Some of you will say, well, that's not fair because really we knew all along it technically was a dictatorship. Okay, that's fair. Let's move on to example number 2. Denmark? Okay, here's the time where you point to an entirely homogeneous population, about 1/60th the size of America's, and you point to that as the blueprint. Okay, let's go there. This is a place where the middle class can't even afford a car because of the 180% new car tax. And the Prime Minister was so fed up with Americans pointing to it as a beacon for socialist success that he felt compelled to clarify, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. Sweden? I love Sweden. Okay, great bikini team, and thanks to that country, my armoire now doubles as a bookcase. Speaking of which, the founder of IKEA, let's be honest, the only really cool export from Sweden, aside from a few good hockey players, left Sweden because of the stifling high tax rate. So, Sweden, good place, not bad people, but a successful model for a viable economy in today's global market? Incorrect. The fact is that over time, the greatest enemy of socialism is reality. The reality that human nature will invariably pull certain people toward individualism and success and others toward laziness and collectivism. The tension between the makers and the takers always leads to socialism's inevitable collapse. But I know that I can give you examples of failed socialist economies until I'm blue in the face, and you won't care. Because at least socialism is inherently more morally altruistic than the evil, greedy, capitalist warmongering seen in the West. Greed? What's more greedy than wanting to take from someone else something that you haven't earned? Unlike capitalism, free enterprise, which can only occur truly through voluntary transaction, socialism can only occur at gunpoint. That's what it comes down to. If you don't pay your taxes, once you get through the IRS and the auditing and the lawyers and the PR stunts, people make you give the government your money, an increasing amount of your money, the more successful you are, or they send in scary men with guns to take you away. Now, so long as the people having their stuff taken away at gunpoint are in the minority, and the majority feels that they'll get to benefit from more said taken stuff, you'll always be able to win that decision through a popular vote and claim the moral high ground through democracy. Putting the word democratic in front of your socialism doesn't make it any inherently more moral nor less violent. Did you get that? American wannabe socialists also. Get a job. Please, like a real job. You'll probably have to shave first. I'm Stephen Crowder for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here. To help keep our videos free, donate here.
All right, 2 very well done videos and explaining about socialism, especially democratic socialism, which never made any sense to me. It's like progressives. You know, actually they're regressive. They're not progressing into the future, they're regressing into the past, looking to a failed eco-political structure like socialism. And so they're actually regressive progressives, which I think could be an oxymoron. I don't know. Could it? Dave's made a really good point here. We aren't researching anything of value. How many people research the Bible to make sure what they believe is true? Less than 10%. If they don't care about that, then they won't research government either. And that's and folks, that therein lies the problem. Too many folks out there that I've been in all sorts of, not sorts of different. I spent 15 to 20 years of my life in the trucking industry between driving and dispatching or owning my own truck and hauling logs. Met a lot of good people, but when you start talking to them about headlines that have to do with politics and stuff like that, they disengage. They don't want nothing to do with it. I don't like politics. And I'm like, what? You don't have to like it, But do you realize that politics permeates every aspect of your life almost? You know, I wouldn't say 100%, but, you know, it's darn close. And why shouldn't you care about what the people you're supposedly voting for are doing in your name? And people are they just check out of stuff like that. They'll let other people, well, you know, somebody else take care of it. And that's the problem. I keep talking about bread and circus, and that's what's happening in America today. There's too much bread and circus. You know, people are being entertained and they're being fed by the government. You know, that's almost like, you know, see what I'm doing here, but don't look at what I'm doing over here. This is the bread and circus over here. You'll like this. You know, we'll give you everything you need learning. You know, we'll pay for your school, pay for your food, pay for your cell phone, everything like that over here. You like us now, don't you? But then they don't look over here and see the evils that are being done in your name and done by that. And we've been talking about this for a long time. One of them is healthcare. And again, I defy the democratic socialists in America to actually point out to me in the Constitution where it is actually, and explain. Don't just say it's right here and just go on, because all you're doing is sharing a talking point. I want you to explain your own words, or even the words of the founders about health care or Americans' health. You know, I had a lady yesterday say, well, you know, she was reading down through the comments and she made an offhand comment saying, well, I bet you $10 that he disagrees, that he thinks that taxes are unconstitutional. And I wrote back, you lose that $10, and then I explained how she'd lose that $10. Not only does Congress have the enumerated power to tax, but it's limited. We also have the 16th Amendment, which was ratified. A lot of people say it wasn't, but look, it was. It's the law of the land. It's been since 1913, and the only way we can get rid of it is if we repeal it. So personal income tax is constitutional. It is part of the Constitution, so it would be constitutional. People's minds don't work that way. It doesn't matter how much I'm against something. Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No matter how much you disagree with that, it is part of the Constitution. They are protected rights, protected from the government, not just the federal government, from all governments. And this is where, you know, I get really frustrated when these cities say, well, we're allowed to infringe people's Second Amendment rights because we're a city, we're a municipality on our own. It's like, a right is universal. And if it's protected in the Constitution on the federal level, it's protected everywhere. So these cities, these gun-free zones and stuff like that, they're unconstitutional because they're infringing on your Second Amendment rights. And the funny thing, the whole funny thing about this Second Amendment is they actually are penalizing, the anti-gun crowds out there are penalizing the citizens that are the most law-abiding. I'm a gun owner. I get background check, concealed carry permit. I'm pushing for a constitutional carry here in Pennsylvania where we don't have to go get permitted. You know, just like I said, I don't mind background checks, you know, because I do think it does, to a certain extent, weed out some people that don't, or not allowed to have guns. But even those folks that don't pass a background check, there's nothing in the law to stop them from go getting a gun of their own. I'm not saying they're legally allowed to have it, don't get me wrong there, but laws don't stop criminals from doing things. Never have, never will. Even God's laws, God's commandments, don't stop people from doing dumb and stupid. You know, they're just like they say that, you know, people make this argument about capital punishment is there to punish murderers, you know, and keep, and the old argument was that capital punishment keeps a sane person from doing something insane. I think that analogy falls down a little bit, because you could say the same thing about life imprisonment. You know, if you just take their freedoms away from them for the rest of their lives and put them in a little 5x5 cell, and that's where they're going to be the rest of their lives, that could be a deterrent too. But my analogy is a padlock is to keep an honest man honest. Padlock will not stop a thief. A locked door will not stop a thief if they're determined. A locked door and a padlock will actually keep a law-abiding citizen law-abiding until they decide they want to break the law. You know, and that just tells, and to me it just tells folks that, you know, I not prized, but I want to protect my possessions from thievery. And, you know, a lot of people won't even think about stealing from somebody else, you know. So even that analogy, you know, that a lock will keep, you know, someone from breaking the law, you know, a law-abiding citizen from breaking the law, that sort of falls down too. I think obeying the law has to be a personal thing. You know, whether that shed's locked up or not, if you want to follow the law, you don't go in there and take stuff. You don't borrow stuff without asking. That's stealing. You know, and things along that lines. You know, it's got to be a personal, internal thing that we do. And so, again, you know, we're on this slippery slope in America where we don't understand, and this is the tragedy of it all. Americans don't even understand their Constitution. They're not taught it in schools anymore. Civics 101. They hear about it, and this is the other thing. These folks, the anti-freedom folks out there, research all sorts of things out there. But like we were talking about, like Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy, about they're always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. They go out and learn these things, and it's always a surface learning. It's always right at the surface. They skim across it. They don't deep dive into it. And I'm not saying everybody has to deep dive into everything. I'm not saying that at all, because there's subjects out there I could give two wits about, and they bore me to tears, and I'm not going to research them. But we're not talking about subjects like that. We're talking about subjects that affect every single American, like the Constitution. We're talking about subjects like health care, that Obamacare came in and took over the whole healthcare system and took choice and freedom away from every American. From every American. And that irks me, because they took my choice away. I've been discussing this on with folks over at Indivisible and Common Cause on Facebook. I've been discussing. I love discussing things on Facebook, because you can. I don't like to write books, but I can put a little bit bigger thought than I can over in Twitter. And like I said, it just amazes me how many of these people want to point to the Constitution and say yes, it does, but they can't explain how it does. They can't explain to you how it does. And they're always learning, but never coming to the knowledge of the truth or an understanding of the truth. And the truth is, and I've said this for many years, and nobody has knocked me off my perch yet about this. I've said this for years, that the Constitution does not authorize the federal government in any capacity, form, or whatever, no matter how well-intentioned you think you are, and your ideas should be universally accepted by everybody. If they're not, then you're just an unfeeling boob that should be taken out of society, because you don't care about people. You know, when you're talking about getting rid of Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, whatever it might be, the government program that it might be. And yes, I'll be the first one to admit to you, if we ever get rid of stuff like this, is there going to be some pain in the country? Yes. Is there going to be some growing pains? Absolutely. But I'm telling you right now, the free market works a whole lot faster than people think. That people get this idea about how slow the government goes and how slow the government acts on things. And they're so indoctrinated with that. When you talk to them about the speed of the free market, they don't understand it. You know, they really don't understand how fast the free market can actually jump into gear and get things started. And because one thing, they don't have to go through all this. A company, let's say a health insurance company, doesn't have to jump hoops. Let's say real quick here, let's say we get rid of tomorrow. Let's say they vote and the President Trump signs it Monday. Let's say tomorrow they vote and they pass in the Senate and the House. Let's say they both do it. You know, I know it's not going to happen. Let's say they both say, hey, let's just do a straight out repeal. This thing sunsets at the end of the month or the end of August. You know, give them a month. Okay, now you're going to hear, if that happens, you're going to hear wailing and gnashing of teeth like you have never heard before in America in your life. The newspapers, there's going to be so much ink and physical and digital ink spilt over how they just destroyed America, that it isn't funny. And while they're doing that, while they're wailing and gnashing of teeth, these health insurance companies they're not idiots, and they don't have to go through the bureaucracy like Congress does. They can within that month's time, they can be back in the individual market, back into the business markets, and a lot of them, and this is the dirty little secret they don't tell you, the last company I was with before I developed fibromyalgia was Mohawk Flush Doors. It's a Masonite company, and they had group insurance, which wasn't on the Obamacare exchanges. It was done by Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I think down in Georgia, I think it was. So right there, and a lot of corporations are still that way. They still have the regular insurance. They just have to meet different criteria in Obamacare. So we're not even talking about, if Obamacare went away tomorrow, everybody on group insurance, they wouldn't even notice a difference. Honestly, they wouldn't notice a difference. Matter of fact, all the differences would be internal, because then they could roll back some of the Obamacare initiatives and requirements, and might even be able to deliver the insurance cheaper to the companies. And trust me, I tell you, corporations like Masonite and other corporations are going to check into that, making sure, okay, we know it costs you more money to do these regulations, but now these regulations are gone. We want to see some cost savings here, because they're about saving a buck just like anybody else is. So then you got, and I would say, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's fairly high. The last time I checked was like a couple months ago. The percentage of people on group insurance, like through the businesses and stuff like that, is still fairly high, 60, 70%. So you're only talking about 30% left of the population, or the adult population, let's say, in the country that would be looking for individual policies. Well, the one thing, and this, I keep touting this, the one thing that they could do with the repeal, along with the repeal, is also getting rid of the portability laws and allowing, through the Commerce Clause, telling the states you cannot stop your citizens from buying insurance in another state. That violates the Commerce Clause. Shut that down, and then, Katie, bar the door. Because the free market will ramp up so fast it'll make liberals' heads spin, and they're going to be... The whole funny thing about this is, and maybe I shouldn't be laughing about it, but to me it's too funny not to. The lamestream media and their acolytes are going to, like I said, there's going to be so much wailing and gnashing of teeth by these folks if this would happen, that all this other stuff could actually happen in the background and they wouldn't even notice it. And that's the funny part about it. They wouldn't even notice it, and all of a sudden things are coming up. People are getting insured that want insurance, because there's a group of people out there, young folks, that don't want to spend their money on that because they're healthy, and they know what their wants, needs, desire, and their risk level is. I'm not going to try to dictate to them what that is. Obamacare tried to do that, and it's a miserable failure. And so the people that want health insurance are going to be able to get it. If I'm an individual, I can join an association that may not be in my state and get group insurance through them, get a good rate, get my family covered. All done. It's all done. And this drives liberals nuts. I even asked these people on Common Cause and on Indivisible Group, I said, why am I forced to choose something I don't want? Why am I forced to buy something that I don't want? Well, let's say I don't want health insurance. I just want to live my life in peace and quiet. And if I die, I die. If I don't, I don't. What's it to you? Why can't I choose? Why can't I have the freedom to choose that? Honestly, I never get an answer. When I do, again, they start, disparaging you. You're just so uncaring. You're an alt-right, idiot. Just also the profanities come out and everything, and they never really explain to you why things are the way they are. Oh my, I feel like I've been on a rant the whole show, folks. I have been. But it does. It amazes me how many people buy into this lie of socialism. And when they buy into it, they'll buy into socialism, but they won't buy into free market capitalism. They won't buy into that we're a representative republic, not a democracy. They won't buy into stuff like that. And those are the actual facts and truth of the matter. We are a constitutional representative republic, or you could say a representative republic that is governed by the Constitution, which gives us liberty by law. It guarantees our liberty by having a framework of law that protects our liberties. and enhances our freedom. Doesn't grant us freedoms, but enhances and protects our freedoms. They don't understand that, but they think they understand socialism, and they don't even understand socialism. They really don't. And that to me, that's one of the funny aspects about this. Real quick here, some of the I'm not going to be able to get into them, but there's some other things that came up on my radar, and it might do you some good to go over and read about this. I have an article in here by Mike Meharry over at the 10th Amendment Center about the General Welfare Clause is not about writing checks. It's absolutely not about writing checks. And also, there's also another one over there by Brian McClanahan over at the blog at the 10thamendmentcenter.com. And it's talking about nullification, and it's asking a question. Nullification is lawlessness, not according to the founders. And Thomas Jefferson was a huge one about the states not following unconstitutional federal laws, that they were not allowed to actually pass according to the Constitution. There's an article, I thought this was a good one, over the Daily Signal by Fred Lucas, Meet the Elected Democrat Who Wants to Fight Voter Fraud. And there are folks out there that want to fight voter fraud. And I actually had an idea about this last night. And Dave, you can tell me if I'm all washed up or not. There's Let America Vote is a George Soros funded group, and they're pretty heavy into this, anti-voter ID and anti-checking to make sure that our voter rolls are correct and only legal voters are voting. And I got this idea last night, and I might try to run with it. I'm a registered member of the Constitution Party, but I'm registered to vote here in Northumberland County, PA. And so I was thinking about just gathering up everybody that's registered to vote knows their information, name, address, and, are you or not. You can put in your party affiliation if you want, because they're going to find that out anyway. That's not private information, contrary to Let America Vote's beliefs, but actually emailing it to the commission. Hey, I'm a legal voter. Here's my information. Check me out. And actually getting Americans to do that. The funny thing of this whole story, and Colorado's leading the way, there's a lot more Democrats, but there's some Republicans that are canceling or deregistering voting. They don't want the government to have that information, so they're going and canceling their registration to vote and getting cleaned off the voter rolls. I think that's hilarious. Honestly, I think that's hilarious, because Let America Vote has done such a good job preaching to their folks about, and lying to them actually, about what the voter commission, the fraud commission is all about, and what information they're going to get. And they haven't even read. I asked a couple of them, and they told me flat out, no, I didn't read the executive order. We just know it's wrong just by its title. I said, well, then you don't know what's in it. And I read the executive order a couple times. And in the executive order that Donald Trump penned to create this commission on voter fraud, it says they have to follow state laws when it comes to what information they can get. They just can't go in there and get every ounce of information that they want. They have to actually follow the laws of each state. But you never hear Let America Vote like that. So whenever they put something out on Twitter, and I do sort of troll them this way, I tell them, would you quit lying to the people and tell them, and I'll put a link to the executive order and say, read the executive order. It says they have to follow the state laws in collecting the information. So that's kind of funny that there's Democrats out there that want to fight voter fraud too. And this article goes back to the Russian collusion and all the unmasking that was going on during that. Former UN Ambassador Powers emerges as central figure in Obama unmasking investigation. So they're still investigating this. This is an article by Adam Credo, published on the 19th from the Washington Free Beacon. So they're investigating this Russian collusion, but you know what they're coming up with? They're coming up with all the malfeasances that the Democrats are actually committing. And that I keep warning people. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. And they're wishing for an investigation of this Russian thing, and they were hoping it was going to be against the Republicans, but the more and more information are turning up, like I talked about yesterday, Democrats don't want these guys investigated in the House for cybersecurity issues. And, it's, again, why would you want your computer systems actually secured. Boggles the imagination. It does. I put a short video out on YouTube called Women's March in Support of Felons the other day. And on the Women's March this past Sunday, that the Muslim lady So Sour and was leading that, and they had some other speeches there. They were complaining about, even in that the group who was part of this Women's March was remember that we talked about this too, the NRA ad with Dana Loresh that was talking about, you know, the putting up the fist of resistance or whatever. I don't remember the exact words right now, but she was talking intellectually, not physically. And so this group that was condemning the NRA over that ad supports a violent rhetoric that embraces a convicted cop killer. There is Joanna Chismard, and this was in this video the other day, is living not a life of luxury, but living out of confinement down in Cuba as a political, under political asylum down there, as a political refugee from America. And yet she was convicted of killing execution style State Trooper Forrester of New Jersey way back when, and some friends of her helped break her out of prison, and she fled to Cuba and seeking political asylum down there. So she's living free down there, and this is one of the reasons why we don't want to normalize relations with Cuba, because they have more than just her that are living down there as political prisoners or under political asylum, when they're actually convicted felons here. Never went through the appeal process or anything to try to get their convictions overturned. They just took off and ran. And so I thought that was kind of interesting there. I didn't get into this today. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, about asset forfeitures. And I'm totally against these because of the way they do them. They can take your, if you're not even convicted of a crime, you're suspected of a crime and put on arrest for a crime, in some states, and even the federal government can come in and seize your assets, houses, cars, money in the bank, anything. And good luck getting it back. Even if you're not even convicted and there's no conviction and you were exonerated and everything, good luck getting your money back. Now, some states have put up state laws saying we're not going to do that. In order to take their property, they have to be convicted in the court of law through due process. And Jeff Sessions is leading this charge at the DOJ, talking about asset forfeitures, even if states put in laws. And so we're going to talk about that real quick tomorrow. I am running out of time. There's a lot of other things. I put up some really good links that I research every day and look at and read over at the DanClementsShow.com on the show notes page. I know I have a caller up there from area code 503, and I think I know who it is, but I don't have time to get to you today. If you want to call back in tomorrow, and call in early, I'll try to put you up on the show, and we'll have a little gab session, because tomorrow is Free for All Friday. So we'll do that, and on tomorrow on that. So that's the music. That's the end of the show. Hopefully you learned something about the Constitution, some other stuff in there from me today. And I'm going to be putting out some short videos about all the constitutional things I've been talking about this week. I think they're good. I think they're good topics to discuss. So this has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon for Free for All Friday. I can't say that enough.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.